A desperate struggle. The fight for Little Round Top. The air crackled with gunfire and smoke choked the battlefield. The sounds of musket fire and cannon blasts echoed through the hills, creating a cacophony of chaos and destruction. Soldiers on both sides were engulfed in the thick, acrid smoke that hung over the battlefield like a shroud, obscuring their vision and making every step a perilous gamble. On Little Round Top, a desperate struggle raged. The Union forces, knowing the strategic importance of this high ground, were determined to hold their position at all costs. The rocky terrain and dense underbrush made the fighting even more brutal, as soldiers grappled with both the enemy and the unforgiving landscape. Union soldiers, outnumbered and running low on ammunition, fought with bayonets and bare hands. Their resolve was tested as wave after wave of Confederate soldiers charged up the hill, each assault more ferocious than the last. The Union men, exhausted and battered, dug deep into their reserves of courage and determination, knowing that failure was not an option. Among them was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, a college professor turned soldier. Chamberlain, who had no formal military training before the war, quickly proved himself to be a natural leader. His ability to inspire and rally his men under the most dire circumstances became legendary, and his actions on Little Round Top would cement his place in history. He would later recall the ferocity of the Confederate assault, a tidal wave of gray crashing against their lines. The Confederates, driven by their own sense of duty and desperation, fought with a tenacity that seemed almost superhuman. Chamberlain's men, though weary and outnumbered, stood their ground, their bayonets gleaming in the dim light as they prepared for yet another charge. Chamberlain's men held, their valor a testament to the human cost of the fight for freedom. Each soldier knew that their sacrifice was part of a larger struggle, one that would determine the future of the nation. The ground they defended was more than just a strategic position. It was a symbol of their commitment to the cause of liberty and justice. The fight for Little Round Top was a microcosm of the larger battle, a brutal clash of wills that would decide the fate of a nation. The courage and determination displayed by both sides in this small but pivotal engagement encapsulated the broader conflict, highlighting the immense sacrifices made by countless individuals in the pursuit of their ideals. The legacy of Little Round Top endures as a powerful reminder of the resilience and bravery that defined the Civil War, and the enduring struggle for freedom and equality that continues to shape our world today. Crossroads of War Gettysburg's strategic significance. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, was one of the most crucial engagements of the American Civil War. This small town in Pennsylvania became the focal point of a massive conflict that would determine the future of the United States. Gettysburg was a turning point in the Civil War. The battle involved the largest number of casualties of the entire war and is often described as the war's turning point. The Union and Confederate armies clashed in a brutal contest of strategy, endurance, and sheer willpower. The Confederacy, led by General Robert E. Lee, was on the offensive. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia had been riding a wave of success, having won significant victories at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Lee believed that a successful invasion of the North would demoralize the Union and possibly encourage foreign intervention. They aimed to deliver a decisive blow to the North, hoping to force a negotiated peace. Lee's strategy was to move his army into Pennsylvania, threaten major northern cities like Philadelphia, and draw the Union Army away from the war-torn Virginia. A victory on northern soil could have shifted the political landscape in favor of the Confederacy. Victory at Gettysburg could have changed the course of the war, but it was not to be. The stakes were incredibly high, and both sides knew that the outcome of this battle could very well determine the fate of the nation. The Confederate forces were confident, but the Union Army was prepared to defend their territory at all costs. The Union Army of the Potomac, under the command of General George Meade, stood firm. Meade had only recently taken command, but he quickly organized his forces to meet the Confederate threat. The Union soldiers were determined to hold their ground, knowing that the future of the Union depended on their success. The Confederates fought with tenacity and skill, but the Union's resolve proved unbreakable. Despite their best efforts, the Confederate forces were unable to break through the Union lines. The battle raged on for 3 days, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The failure of Lee's ambitious assault on the third day known as Pickett's Charge, sealed the Confederacy's fate at Gettysburg. Pickett's Charge was a bold and desperate attempt to break the Union center, but it ended in disaster for the Confederates. The Union forces repelled the assault, inflicting devastating losses on the attacking troops. The retreat that followed marked the beginning of the end for the Southern cause. The Confederate Army was forced to withdraw, and they would never again mount a significant offensive in the North. The Battle of Gettysburg was a turning point in the Civil War, signaling the decline of the Confederate war effort and the eventual triumph of the Union. Brothers divided, a nation forged and broken. The Civil War was a conflict that pitted brother against brother, friend against friend. At Gettysburg, this tragic division was on full display. Soldiers from the same towns, sometimes even from the same families, found themselves on opposing sides of the battlefield. One Union soldier, writing home after the battle, described the surreal experience of seeing familiar faces among the Confederate dead. The human cost of the battle was staggering. Over 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or captured during those 3 bloody days in July. The fields around Gettysburg were transformed into a vast graveyard, a grim testament to the horrors of war. Their muskets began to speak, the first day's fury. On July 1st, 1863, the battle erupted with sudden violence. The tranquil fields and rolling hills of Gettysburg were suddenly transformed into a chaotic and deadly battleground. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder, and the ground shook with the thunderous roar of cannon fire. Confederate troops, marching east from Chambersburg, encountered Union cavalry under the command of John Buford. Buford, a seasoned cavalry officer, had chosen his ground wisely, positioning his men on the high ground to the west of the town. His goal was to delay the Confederate advance until reinforcements could arrive. The Confederates were initially driven back, but reinforcements arrived, and soon the fields west of Gettysburg echoed with the roar of cannon fire. The battle lines surged back and forth, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The noise was deafening, and the smoke from the cannons and muskets created an eerie, almost surreal atmosphere. The fighting raged throughout the day, with both sides gaining and losing ground. Soldiers on both sides fought with a grim determination, knowing that the outcome of this battle could very well determine the fate of the entire war. The fields and woods around Gettysburg became a deadly maze of smoke, fire, and blood. As the sun began to set, the Confederates launched a massive assault, driving the Union forces back through the streets of Gettysburg and onto the high ground south of town. The Union soldiers, exhausted and battered, retreated in a desperate attempt to regroup and form a new defensive line. The first day had ended in a Confederate victory, but the Union Army had found a strong defensive position. General George Meade, the Union commander, quickly recognized the strategic importance of the high ground south of Gettysburg and ordered his men to fortify their positions. The Union soldiers worked through the night, digging trenches and building makeshift fortifications. The stage was set for an even bloodier confrontation. Both sides knew that the battle was far from over, and that the coming days would bring even more intense and brutal fighting. The soldiers steeled themselves for what lay ahead, knowing that the fate of their nation hung in the balance. The Battle of Gettysburg was just beginning, and the first day's fury was only a prelude to the carnage that was to come.